All right, this is the copyright disclaimer. The copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Fair use, fair use, fair use.
Niecey Brown was a 74-year-old black woman who was beaten to death in her home in 1945 by an off-duty white police officer. Injustice and racism allowed this horrific act to happen to her, and it allowed the officer who took her life to go free. On June 12, 1945, Niecey Brown was at her home in Selma, Alabama. She was at home with her husband, Lige Brown, and their two grandchildren. Early in the morning, an off-duty police officer named George Booker came to the Browns' home. When Mrs. Brown opened the door, the officer tried to force his way into the house. He said that he needed to talk to one of her family members. Mrs. Brown refused to let him in the home, and she asked him to leave. It was at this point that the officer became upset. Officer Brown kicked in the door. Once inside, he began to beat Mrs. Brown with a bottle. He beat her so bad that he fractured her skull. Mrs. Brown's husband came to her defense. He fired his weapon at the officer, striking him in the shoulder. But Mrs. Brown never recovered from her injuries. She died 2 days later. Officer George Brown was later arrested and charged with taking Mrs. Brown's life. But this was 1945 in the Jim Crow South, and black people rarely got justice. At the officer's trial in September of 1945, his lawyer told the all-white jury that they needed to uphold Jim Crow and find the officer not guilty. And that's exactly what happened. The jury took less than 5 minutes to find him not guilty of taking Mrs. Brown's life. What happened to Mrs. Brown in 1945 still happens today. In 2015, Betty Jones was a 55-year-old black woman who lost her life when a Chicago police officer fired his weapon at her after she opened the door to her house. She'd done nothing wrong. Police took 93-year-old Pearlie Golden's life in her home. Katherine Johnson was a 92-year-old black woman who lost her life in her house after the police executed a botched raid on her home. Police had the wrong home and then even lied and planted drugs in Miss Johnson's house to try to cover up their actions. Tarika Wilson was a 26-year-old black woman and a mother who lost her life in her home after the police fired at her as she was holding her infant child. I could keep going because there are so many more stories like this. Jim Crow created the conditions for a police officer to take Mrs. Brown's life in 1945. And sadly, those same conditions are still present today. Black people are still experiencing that same old misery of racial injustice, and no one doing anything about it.
All right, Shalom. We are the Hebrew Israelites from the Indianapolis branch of the Great Millstone, and we're here to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahushai, Ba'Hashem, Rahakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well in teaching us this 100% truth. Salutations to them and our fellow Akim who labor in this truth week in and week out on the highways and byways. Also salutations to the hopeful elect of the scattered 12 tribes of Israel, scattered to the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, also known as your Israelite foreigners, and your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. To you, we say Shalom.
Shalom.
All right, today is another installment of our camp series called For Thy Violence Against Thy Brother Jacob. Today's article is coming from EJI, which stands for Equality Justice Initiative, and we'll be covering the situation that happened in Selma, Alabama back in 1945. It is titled White Police Officer Beats Elderly Black Woman to Death. We will put a link to this article in the description box of the video. Before we get into this article, let's go ahead and get with the opening scripture. Obadiah 1 and 10.
This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 10. It says, For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. You know, ultimately, when you go throughout the book of Obadiah, which is really only one chapter to the book of Obadiah, but that one chapter in itself is very powerful because it goes into the judgment that the Lord, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, is getting ready to bring upon Esau, even the so-called white man. And why? And the main reason why is because what? For his violence that he's committed against the children of Israel. All right, today being the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay, and you know, this is what installment is this?
This is 207.
207.
Yep.
And as we always say, man, you know, we barely scratch the surface pertaining to all the evils and atrocities that Esau, Edom, so-called white man, has committed toward the children of Israel, right? The so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay, but one thing we do know, as the scriptures tell us, right, that what the sins of this place have reached into the heavens. You know, and this place is filled with the blood of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay, so the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, has everything in account that this devil has done to our people, which is why the judgment that he's about to receive is ultimately justified, man.
Yeah, I just saw a clip the other day. It's like all of the police brutalities, like over half of them throughout history have not been reported. So it's like you say, it's a whole lot of stuff we don't know that they didn't print. All right. Anybody got anything else? Okay, go ahead and get into the article. And once again, the link to this article will be in the description box. It says, on June 12, 1945, Niecey Brown, a 74-year-old black woman, died from injuries after an off-duty white police officer named George Booker forcibly entered her house and beat her with a bottle in Selma, Alabama. It says, during the early morning on June 10th, Officer Booker arrived at Mrs. Brown's home unannounced. According to reports, when Mrs. Brown answered the door, Officer Booker demanded entry so he could speak with one of her family members. When Mrs. Brown refused him entry and asked him to leave, Officer Booker kicked in the door and began beating her with a bottle, fracturing her skull. It says Leach Brown, Mrs. Brown's husband, came to his wife's aid and shot the officer in the shoulder in self-defense. The Browns' two grandchildren were also home and witnessed the brutal attack on their grandmother. 2 days later, Mrs. Brown, whose skull was crushed, died from her injuries, having never regained consciousness.
Precept.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 6. It says, I was wroth with my people, I have polluted mine inheritance, and given them into thine hand. Which ultimately we understand that due to we're in the position that we're in due to our disobedience against the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So when you read about stories and articles in history highlighting gruesome deaths, that so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans had died, it all circles back to our disobedience against the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Hell, the 4th chapter goes into what the Lord said He sold us to the nations, not for our destruction, but what? Because we provoked him unto wrath by sacrificing unto idols. Okay, so that's why Jake is fucked up, man. From the oldest to the youngest. It says, now did it show them no mercy upon the ancient has now very heavily laid thy yoke. The ancient being what? The elder of our people. And we see within this article that this is a 74-year-old woman. She ain't got no strength like that, and she couldn't really put up a fight if she wanted to. So for this Edomite cop to just barge in and just go haywire, man, it was uncalled for. But at the end of the day, that goes to show, right, the perpetual hatred that Esau, even the so-called white man, has towards the children of Israel. And because he ain't show our nation any mercy, he himself is not gonna get no mercy.
And that's one of his signs. He's notorious for attacking women, children, the old and the feeble. No one who's going to match him or strength for strength. That's why he needs to take everything from you, so you can't fight back. That's just the nature of this devil. All right. I had a precept to back you up on what you said about our transgressions. This is the prayer of Azariah 1. Verse 7, it says, in all things have we trespassed and not obeyed thy commandments, nor kept them, neither done as thou hast commanded us, that it might go well with us. Verse 8, wherefore all that thou hast brought upon us, and everything that thou hast done to us, thou hast done in true judgment. And what was that judgment? Against the law, statutes, and commandments, and ultimately the curses for not keeping those. All right. Verse 9, and thou didst deliver us into the hands of lawless enemies, most hateful forsakers of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and to an unjust king, and the most wicked in all the world. All right, and that unjust king has been like that throughout history. Okay, everybody keeps relying on this leadership, these presidents and stuff, And hell, they're part of the problem when it comes to the nation of Israel. Okay, and we see that blatantly with this guy in office right now. You know, everyone is working against us. All right, but we put it in their hands by being disobedient. All right, so I had anything else?
Keep reading.
Oh, huh?
So you keep reading. I got precept.
Okay.
Where you go down there.
Okay. Back to the article. It says Officer Booker was arrested and charged with murder. During his trial in September 1945, his lawyer cautioned the all-white jury, "If we convict this brave man who is upholding the banner of white supremacy by his actions, then we may as well give all our guns to the niggers and let them run the black belt." Oh, wow. The jury heeded this advice, ignoring eyewitness testimony and deliberating for only a few minutes before acquitting Officer Booker of all charges. Man. It says, after the Civil War, the system of policing evolved as a way to maintain racial hierarchy. Though officers were meant to protect and serve their communities, in most cases police departments were restricted to white officers, many of whom used their power to subject black people to indiscriminate violence. Officers who terrorized and brutalized black people were rarely held accountable and were often instead exalted as defenders and upholders of racial hierarchy. And that concludes the article.
So this is Amos chapter 1 and verse 11.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "Thus saith the Lord Yahweh Shemashah power, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever." Right? Going into Esau Edom having that perpetual hatred for Jacob, man. All right, but Yahweh Shemashah, he's gonna hold all of his sins, his violence, his persecutions that Edom has had against Jacob against him.
Mm-hmm.
All right, at a certain period of time, man, because Yahweh Shemashah is taking account of all this, man. All right, and I believe before it was a police, it goes back to it was a slave catch. The police used to be slave catchers.
Oh, so it was called Slave Patrol, and they eventually became the police as we know today. Because that same star for the Slave Patrol is like the same star today on police uniforms, which, by the way, is the same. It's modeled right after the star of the state of Israel that they use. It's not the Star of David. David didn't have a star, but it's modeled right after that. The 6 points. As a matter of fact, it is Israel who currently trains our law enforcement. They go over there, or Israel will come over here, and we're talking about an article right after this where the militaries are going to come together in the end anyway. So,
yep, especially in the 1940s, man, they weren't letting Jake be a police officer, man.
Mm-hmm.
It was all set up that way for a purpose for our people, for Jake to get persecuted, so that Esau could just literally walk into your house and just commit a battery, man.
And I think in some places they did allow Jake to be police officers, but you couldn't. They had no ability to arrest, and they couldn't have guns.
Oh,
you saw that in Harlem Nights. Yeah, they wouldn't let you couldn't arrest a white person.
Let's sit on that.
Kind of that's something good.
It's Book of Psalms, chapter 10, and verse 2. It says, "The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous whom the Lord abhorreth." All right, and as we know, Esau, Edom, all right, the so-called white man is one of the most proud, all right, race of people walking this earth, man. All right, and it said what in his pride he does persecute the poor. And who is the poor? All right, it's the nation of Israel, man. All right, we constantly see week in and week out in these videos how Esau, his eyes are always set to destroy or do some type of harm to the nation of Israel, man. All right, he's currently in power, and what is he choosing to do with his power? Is to destroy Israel, man. All right. It says, for the wicked boasts of his heart's desire, and blessed the covetous whom the Lord abhors. So Esau, at this current point in time, he's currently in that mind state of what I can do what I want, man.
Yep.
All right. That's why he does the things that he does to Jake, and doesn't see no type of consequences that follows, man. All right. And what in this society, those that are wicked, and covetous are blessed, because that's how Esau rules this place, man. All right. I got a few more verses. You want to get your precept real quick, or I can finish?
Mine's just a couple verses, so you can finish this one.
Yeah. It says, verse 4: the wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after Yahweh. Yahweh is not in all his thoughts, and we know the Lord isn't in Esau's thoughts at all, man. All right, because first off, his pride is so high that he thinks himself to be on a level above the Lord, man. All right, which we obviously we know that's not the case. All right, but he like I said, he does these things and doesn't see no consequences coming. It says, his ways are always grievous, thy judgments are far above out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. All right, so his ways, meaning the way he does things, all right, his way of life, the way he runs his society, what? They're always grievous, man. All right, and when you go into, that word grievous, the root word being grief, it goes into, suffering, hardship, or affliction, or and things like that, man. So the things that he do, all right, they're done to make people suffer, man. All right, it says, and his judgments are far above out of his sight. So he doesn't, and he like I was going into earlier, his pride is so high he don't see judgment coming, man. All right, it says,
fear the Lord.
Yep, and as for his enemies, he puffed at them. So he got that spirit of like, hey, yeah, I did what I did, and what are you gonna do about it, man? All right, he's like the big bully on the school playground, man. All right, it says, I'm gonna skip down a couple verses. I don't want to read the whole chapter. It says, I'm gonna skip down to verse 8. It says, he sitteth in the lurking places of the villages, and the secret places doth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privily set against the poor. So, like I was going into earlier, what this man I'm gonna read verse 9 also. It says, he lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draweth him into his net. All right, so hey, what he's to the nation of Israel, he's like a lion stalking their prey, man, or any type of apex predator stalking their prey. All right, hey, because what Israel is the prey in this land, man. All right, the only protection we can have is from Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shah, man. All right, but Esau, what his eyes are privily set against the poor, man. So he does these things, and that's all his mind is focused on. What he does it either in secrecy, and he does it out in the open, man. All right, that's just the way of Esau, man. All right, I'm gonna stop right there.
Yeah, just something to back you up real quick. This is Isaiah 59 verse 15. It says, yea, truth faileth, and he that departed from evil maketh himself a prey. And the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no judgment. So just backing you up, just to show you that, the ones that become prey, we already are prey without the knowledge, of Yahweh Shemiah Shai is that much more. But when we get this truth, then we speak it, we become that much more out in the open. That's why Elder Malcolm, he says, risking our lives and freedom, we go out in the highways and byways, but it's only by the protection, you know, the mercy of Yahweh Shem Yahushua that, you know, that we're able to do that, you know. But as we can see, we're in a land where truth and justice is not ever going forth,
Right.
you know. But y'all have precepts. I had a couple of precepts, you know. I just want to throw that in there.
Just real quick, this is a Psalm chapter 73, and I'll start at verse
That was
5.
one, and that was the one that I had. So it's weird.
It says, they are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. See, in a case in point, this article we just read, and then the many articles we read in the past, it goes to show you that, you know, true justice was not carried forth after Esau, even the so-called white man, committed that heinous act. And even when you made that point, I was thinking about Habakkuk, the first chapter, that talks about the law is slack, therefore the wrong judgment proceeded. So under the rule of Esau, even the so-called white man, okay, true justice never goes forth, man.
And bringing it back to the article, as it mentioned, it said that he was arrested, but then they pretty much talked to the people and saying that, look, we can't convict him because then, you know, we're gonna pretty much start giving the so-called black man power, you know, in other words. So that's where truth faded, you know, what you just quoted, you know.
Hey, you know, had the roles been reversed, man, shit. That if it was a Jake man who killed a elderly white woman, that Jake man wouldn't have even had trial. They would have sent him straight to the chopping block. They would have lynched him immediately.
Yeah.
Well, we've had, you know, over 200 videos, and several videos show what they've done to Jake when he was falsely accused. How much more when he actually had done it. Well, we also know, you know, it's like another thought came to mind, but that's why it's important that we go, you know, that we're following Yahweh Shem Yahushua to the best of our ability, so he protect us from all these things. And again, like the brother had brought out earlier, you know, this is part of the curses.
Yep.
You know, we're bringing these things out and we're ciphering it through the scriptures to show, you know, who the wicked is and who is actually being terrorized and have been terrorized ever since our people set foot on this land, starting with the native Indians, you know, who had occupied this place, and then this, which would be the Northern Kingdom, and then the Southern Kingdom later being brought over here on ships. And of course, the Northern Kingdom was on ships as well. We were all scattered, but we know that that we've been the ones that have been truly terrorized until this very day by this people. All right, you got a quick one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the book of Daniel, chapter 9. Verse 11. Says, Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, because we have sinned against him. And he hath confirmed his words, which he spake against us, and against our judges that judged us, by bringing upon us a great evil. For unto the whole heaven have not been done as have been done unto Jerusalem. So just pointing that out, you know, hey, you read something like this, that just goes to show you how serious, you know, that covenant was. You know, we catching hell wherever we went. You know, once we were kicked out of the land. You know, so Jake, you know, you got to get together, man. You know, especially in these times, repent, because Lord about to tear some stuff up, and we see it. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just finish off this last verse. Back in Psalm 73 and 6, it says, Therefore, pride can pass them about as a chain. You know, due to the fact that they're not in trouble with other men, in their mind, you know, they're able to get away with doing bullshit and committing evil and atrocities on the earth. Now that pride is losing off them because they think that they can get away with it. It's going to continue doing it more and more and more. All right, the same thing going back to Genesis, you know, Lamech, he said, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, surely I shall be avenged 70-fold, to paraphrase. See, so these devils just think they can continue in their wickedness and get away with it. Okay, but hey, we know how the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushua works. Just as how the Lord hardened ancient Pharaoh's heart that he may show his power. The Lord is doing the exact same thing with modern day Pharaoh, Esau, Edom, so-called white man. Because what the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. So the Lord is hardening this devil's heart and making him think that he can get away with everything.
I got something for you.
Come.
This is a book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 8, verse 11. It says, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the hearts of the sons of man is fully set in them to do evil.
And just because Esau is not getting judged immediately, which also he's experiencing his judgment right now. His people are experiencing more homelessness, more poverty, losing jobs and things of that nature. Okay, but Esau, Edom, so-called white man, thinks that just because he wasn't punished immediately for his wickedness, that he would be able to do it forever. Okay, but now it's coming back full circle because the scriptures say that be not deceived, the heavenly Father is not mocked. Whatsoever man soweth, that also shall he reap. And Esau, you're not exempt from that. So that's why your kingdom is falling, your people are mourning, depressed, miserable. Okay, because of all the affliction you inflicted upon us, man.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna stop there.
Okay.
Y'all have anything else?
This is last part of the song.
Okay. Yep.
Just real quick. It's Psalm 73, back in verse 6. It says, therefore pride compassed them about as a chain, and violence covered them as a garment. You see, and violence goes wherever Esau, even so-called white man goes. You know, scriptures talk about how that they bear not the sword in vain. You see, so if they don't get their way, if they see something they don't like, then what's their first answer or their first reaction? Violence, the sword. You know, that's it.
You got something?
No, I'm good.
You good? All right, we'll end with this here. This is the book of Zechariah, chapter 11, verse 4 and 5. It says, thus said the Lord power, feed the flock of the slaughter. So the ones that are being slaughtered, is the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians. And how are you being fed? Through the words of the Heavenly Father, starting, with the head apostles and elders of Great Millstone, the bishops, the elders, of the camps that are scattered worldwide. They're feeding you the knowledge of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai and what we should do to get right with the Heavenly Father before He returns. It says, the flock of the slaughter says, who possessors slay them, and we are in the hands, we are slaves, we are in the hands of our enemy. We have no ruling power in this current present world. Any decisions that are being made, they're being made by another nation who controls how we eat, think, how we should think, and how we should be upon the earth, which is a wicked rulership. All right.
Also, where you live, certain lands you're able to live at.
Time. Yep.
Certain environments. You saw slacker just to more in depth.
No, because what you just stated, the Lord said in the curses that you shall go to your enemy for the want of all things, and these are the same people that have control over, like I said, what we eat, where we live, and they have no good in their heart for our people. It says, and hold themselves not guilty. It says, and they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. And of course, just to the main point, again, going back into Deuteronomy 28:68, it says you should go into Egypt again, which is spiritual Egypt. We were in physical Egypt. We know spiritually Babylon, America is also known as spiritually Egypt and Sodom, and spiritually in this Egypt is for hard bondage. And he said he says that there you'll be sold unto your enemies. And we've seen, and everyone have seen the stories, seen the movies, heard the stories, watched the movies of the so-called blacks, native Indians, being sold and how we've been treated here in the Americas in slavery. It says that no man shall buy you, and that buy goes into no one shall redeem you. But the only one who's the holy Redeemer is Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, His Son. All right. And so if there's nothing else, with that, we like to, hope this lesson was edifying, uplifting, exalting to the elect body of true believers. Before we end, we'd like to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakak, Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the globe. Until next time, all those listening and learning to you, we say Shalom.
Shalom.